Thank you for staying with us. This is Good Morning Kenya. And from the reforms in the security sector, the conversation that was being had right here a couple of minutes ago, we now get into another very important conversation, and that is food security, especially in the face of the heavy rains that we are now experiencing. And joining me yet again for this particular conversation is one Professor Richard Oduor, and he is the chairperson, Kenya University Biotechnology Consortium, and also the Registrar of Research at the Kenyatta University. Prof, welcome to Good Morning Kenya.
Thank you. Good morning.
You're doing okay?
Very well. Thank you.
Yeah, the rains are here with us now. Unfortunately, it is escalating into a humanitarian crisis. Like, why is this so? We knew the rains were going to come even before we get into. What do you feel about this, you know, as someone who is living in this country?
Well, it is sad that it's not really helping the country at the moment. It's now becoming a catastrophe, which is very unfortunate. But I also think it is a problem that runs between the either lack of preparedness or at the same time it could also be, you know, just a case of weaker legislation. Because, you know, this country needs to put its acts together, and particularly to take advantage of natural resources like water. It is sad that you would expect water to be used for irrigation and for, you know, normal household consumption and other things that water does. But unfortunately, instead it's now sweeping away our livestock, it's sweeping away our, you know, people. Property is, you know, in quotes, and I'm putting that in plural deliberately, you know, are also getting down and being broken. And this is sad. So for me, it is unfortunate, but I hope that a lot more preparedness should have been done early enough to ensure that we don't get into this kind of situation every time there is a similar catastrophe.
Yeah, because we don't seem to be conserving any of this water that is pouring, you know. It's unfortunate. But these rains were expected to improve our food security. Is that the case? Is that what is happening?
It's not happening. Actually, right now it's flooding, and with the floods, unless you have the crops that are tolerant to flood, with you know, stronger stocks and adopted to that area, you know, there are also mangroves, there are papyrus, there are reeds that grow on water. So, but unfortunately, we don't eat them. So for that reason, then they are not helping us in this regard, in the discourse around food security. But regarding the use of water for other more important, you know, things like agriculture, then indeed we are wasting the water. We would have expected a little more preparedness, particularly in terms of you know, harvesting this water for other purposes. At the moment, it is just draining or washing down to the seas and to the rivers, and that's it. Of course, it's a lot more than ordinary. The meteorological department had hinted to us that we will have a lot more water, and the peak being November. Well, the start of it probably was a bit wishy-washy in terms of the exactness of that, but again, it was a focused. It is modeling, and therefore we should allow a bit of error margins in terms of starting. But I think they were spot on when they talked about November being the peak of it, and we are seeing it happening. So that we should have done a little bit more. So sometimes very disappointing is that we are talking at a time when these particular sections, like the Tana River areas, the Budalangis, the Ahero areas, these are known conventional areas that are known to be flooding. So it is either the people also in there do not have options of moving to higher grounds because that's where they were born and raised, and there are no alternatives for them. And now then it is about the government looking into how do we then protect these people in cases of such calamities, because we see this every time there is a calamity. So from where I sit, I feel we have not used the opportunity very well that the rains have, you know, has actually, you know, brought to us, and it is again unfortunate.
It can't be reversed from where we sit right now, now that they're already here with us. pouring heavily?
At this point, it is sad because unless you already had dams that were almost getting completed and now you just need to commission them and start accepting water, that would be the most ideal situation to do. But probably thinking that we are able to dig dams right now within the shortest time and probably let it ready to harvest this water, at the moment it's not. Probably we need then to start thinking about what are the other technologies, what are the other things that we can do. Do we therefore start thinking about science in terms of looking at the crops, strengthening them so that they survive floods, they survive salinity, they survive some of these things that come with such kind of calamities. And that's an area that can be explored as well.
Yeah, and I'm trying to look at maybe a small-scale farmer who is watching us right now, and maybe they're trying, or they're wondering what crops maybe would survive this types of rain, you know, this type of rain that we're experiencing right now. Are there particular crops that maybe, or it will depend with the soil of the farmer in the particular place that they're in?
That is a nice technical question, Vivian. Yeah. And if you ask me, it's a lot more wider and a bigger spectrum than currently being discussed. Because if you start looking at what are the possible crops that would be very comfortable around floody environments, you should start thinking around things like the arrowroots, the ndumas. They like a bit wet environments, but also not wet for a long time. But also we are getting to know that these are runoff, surface runoff waters, which mean they can stay there for a day, 2, 3 days, then they disappear. Unless if it is taking a whole month, it's all flooded, then that becomes very difficult even for Nduma itself. But at the moment we need to look at when such things happen, what are the other things that we can do? It's not necessarily sometimes around the crop per se as such. You can take advantage of that situation that this is here, we have reeds working, we have papyrus working. Do we therefore take advantage of other crops? You can actually plant cash crops, not necessarily food crops. Then it gives you money that you can now use to buy the crops that were not able to grow within your environment. All this is happening within the same area. So the discussion can span around looking at not necessarily now crop that we eat, but probably even the cash crops. There are some sugarcane that can be strengthened against a lot of water. And using a lot of water also means that there must be a mechanism within the cell and the plant that is allowing it to release that water so that that water is not diluting its system. Do you know, even in our body system, we are told that water is life. And it's very good to take a lot of water. But do you know, again, if you take a lot of water, you have a disease that is called, psychogenic polydipsia, which simply means that your blood system is getting too diluted, such that even the electrolytes are diluted. And remember, there is an electoral system, the firing system of the nerves. Then if it is overly diluted, then you are also not going to function very well. Remember, that is water that we are told is life. So all these things need to be done in moderation. At the moment, we have a crisis. So under such crisis, sometimes another mechanism is just to let the water flow. Because there was a lot of preparedness, we had already thought about this, it will happen. Now the thing is, we can now use our food reserves that were there earlier on to cushion us during this period that we can't manage the water. But eventually, we just need to profile this country very well like we usually do, and then make sure that we start even warning the people early enough that, hey, we are seeing the rains are coming, we expect you to move. But also Kenyans, they're equally very stubborn. They will say, we will wait for that water until we start swimming from our houses, then it will be fine. So it's all confused in there, but I think we can do better.
Do you even do enough are there enough public participations whereby the farmers are brought together and told, we knew the El Nino rains were coming. Do you feel like there was enough sensitization even with the farmers and just the general public, really?
Well, I think sometimes I listen to many discussions and I get to feel that we really enjoy politics more than the other discussions that are very useful for us. Anything political, we pick it very fast as a country, and we are just wired that way, which is so good and also so bad at the same time. If you know that our appetite is higher for political discussions, then I think that is the discourse, that is the environment within which we also need to discuss sensitization, so that as we are talking about things that we so like politics, then somebody needs to throw in certain things that, hey, even as we discuss this, rains are coming and we need to warn, so that we advise within something that is known. Yeah. Clearly, it was clear that the rains would be here. We knew about it, many of us did, and you would imagine that people who are living within those areas should have heard this, and probably using our national system, including the assistant chiefs, the commissioners and all that, would have cited this. And they sort of did, because we had that. Only that, how do you then only sensitize and you're not giving options? Yeah. So that is where now the challenge starts coming. Because if you go in there and tell them, good people, there is going to be a bit of lot more rain, but we have this, 5,000, apartment somewhere or excluded environment where we are going to host you for 2 months as we see this happening, then you will come back. Everybody will pack and go. But it is different when you tell it will come, but we have not given you the option. So it's about you thinking within your limited resources that you need to plan yourself. And sometimes they genuinely don't have options. Mm-hmm. So, and that is where we now call on Kenyans. These are our brothers and sisters, really. Yeah. And therefore, if you are called upon to help, we should also look out there and just support them.
Yeah, because even if you look at the situation right now, the people who have been displaced, I mean, they don't even have food. They lack food from where they are right now. So it means nothing much was really put in place to ensure that we're looking into, even as we move people to higher grounds, how are they going to be hosted, what are they going to be eating? But anyway, we won't get into that. What maybe policies do you think should be adopted in order to ensure that we are food secure as a country?
There are so many policies that can be dealt with. There is even the policy around even the land acquisition and fragmentation, all these things that are happening. Do you know what is funny, Vivian? Is that Kenya is big enough to accommodate all of us. We can actually comfortably move everybody who is in Tana River and move everybody who is in Ahero and package them in an area and supply them with all the social amenities, and we will just be fine. For us to be food secure, there are many, many other things that we need to look at as a country, particularly the land acquisition and utility, where we are talking about land fragmentation. Because the real, countries that have overcome this challenge of food insecurity really have put in place a lot more of policies, particularly even in settlement. You will find, and we've lived in those places, where settlements are enclosed within a particular area. You relieve the rest of the land so that you have large-scale farming. Now, unfortunately for us, and I come from the western side, from the Nyanza side, you'll find every other person is having their small little homes, and we even have cultures that where your father and grandfather had actually built their home, you can't go and build yours. So after a while, you move to another space. So you have left all the, and even our cemetery, our burial system, every home is spotted with graves. Because one or two, then as you move your grandmother somewhere. So it's all scattered in there. So even if people are right now moved to a settlement that is guided, and we say we are supplying water here, electricity here, security here, leave the rest of land for agriculture, there will be another ritual in terms of how do you deal with the bodies that are already scattered in these 20 acres that now were previously people's homes. So, and that will require a lot of things, including religion, including cultural, including many, many other things to get that to happen. There are already talks ongoing. And people who are deep in matters, land and fragmentation, will actually be at a better place to explain this. But the reality is that as a country we have seen that this is not right. And pieces of land that were previously for agriculture, look at Kiambu. Now, that was agricultural land, but we're now fragmenting it to become now very nice gated communities with the trees and tarmac to whatever, and we are moving into that. So, and Kiambu is the closest county to Nairobi, actually should be able to feed this city somehow in some level, but instead what are we doing to that land? We are actually converting it into residential and apartments and nice homes, and it's becoming very expensive. And when you look at even how the development is happening around this city within the metropolis, you realize even the Machakos side, the Kangundo side, the Ngong side, it's actually all sides, and it's expanding. So as that is happening, what are we doing to the land? So if we assume that the ones around Nairobi in the periphery are right now too exhausted, then we go outside the cities, then we now still have to deal with what do we do with homes. How do you come to me and tell me that we need you to leave your home and we need to concentrate you in a particular area so that we relieve this pieces of land for, for agriculture. That is one, and that's the most extreme. The other most probable thing would be, even right now, there are still spaces spotted within those homes, separated, How do we then merge them or consolidate them through a legal process where you are saying we will have 10 acres or 20 acres or 50 acres of this land. We know it's owned by 10 or 20 people. We have brought you together in a circle-like thing, but this 10 acres, your percentage is a share that you are contributing towards this capital resource, and then we mount technologies in terms of how do we do irrigation, how do we do fertilizer application, how do we give you the good seeds so that food can be produced within that area. It's still very, very possible. But that is another thing. Then other things are now technologies.
Yeah. The new technologies that are being adopted. Now, assessing the situation as it is right now, when, just looking roughly, when will we get to a point where as a country we can say we are food secure? From where you're sitting right now, can you be able to maybe just give a timeline?
Well, timeline might be too hard for me, and because we all live in this country. For the country to be food secure, and let me tell you, all these things we are doing are very good. We can make development, we can do super highways of the digital economy, and they are all happening together. But the moment we have not addressed the food security issue in this country, all those things, because the road is very nice, but I've just used expressway and I love it. But if you are hungry, the fun is not as fun. You must get food inside your stomach, and then you will be happier, enjoying those optical nutrition, which are very good. But at the same time, how do we sort out the value, the food security issue in this country? We are able as a country. And the thinking would be, we need to start looking at food security from the soil preparation to the end of it in the store. And Vivian, my thinking is, look at how do we treat our soil? Yes, the rains are here. Not entire country is flooding. The places that are flooding are known. So what have we done to prepare the places that are flooding, that are just getting ordinary rain, that still the crops can manage? So the soil needs to be tested. And we need to get to know that soil, what is appropriate for it. You will see situations where, for instance, the Ukambani area is known to be a little droughty, it's drought. But you will find that somebody still wakes up and still plants maize there, because that is what we have been made to believe that is staple food. Why can't we let the maize to grow in the Kitale areas and the Rift Valley where it's doing so well? Then the Ukambani area, and that must be designed as a policy, that the Ukambani area is very good for njahe, is very good for this early maturing crops and whatever, and you bulk that a lot more, such that your njahe is available, because that carbohydrates that is coming from maize requires a protein. Then if Central is so good for the warus and all these things, we also say we need this to come from that other side. We all meet in the market, and therefore whoever wants the maize buys, whoever wants the whatever, and therefore you still will be food secure in this country. That is just the soil alone. Once you're done with the soil, then the next thing you need to look at is to figure out, what is this thing? So the soil is not tested, so you don't even know what kind of fertilizers are missing and nutrients. But the government has given you fertilizers to add on the soil whose content and nutritional value you don't know. So you don't even know you are adding more fertilizer to a soil that surely does not need that particular one. And you also must know, if it is too much, the fertilizers themselves, there is even a way of how to apply it. You apply it next to the plant, it burns it. So who is this extension officer who is training farmers on the best practices of how even the fertilizer needs to be done? And that is Kari, or the current now Kalro, used to have a lot of extension officers to talk to the farmers. Even telling the farmers, you go to my village now, you will find other maize is now being planted, others are halfway, others are... Somebody needs to synchronize on the basis of what meteorological has said, saying the good time for you people to plant should be between these 2 weeks. Plant within this time, because that will be in tandem with the rains and how we see it. And that's just a statement that needs to be cascaded down. There are basic things that we need to do. Then after that, the choice of what plant, which maize, which beans, which one is early maturing, which one is drought tolerant, which one is insect protected. And that's where we come in as molecular biologists and people who make genetic engineering and GMOs in this country, as scientists, and doing genome editing. That's where we come in, and we need to be tasked by the Kenyan and the public that you scientists, what have you done and what are you doing towards getting our seeds that are protected? But you know, nobody is, you know, we are chewing a lot more politics than even actually putting our scientists to task and asking them, as a scientist, you know, you do research using taxpayers' money. What is this seed? What is this thing that you're saying? So that we are available also to serve this country. But instead, scientists, we are left to do our things in the lab, and we do a lot of nice things, by the way, in those labs. And we are training, students are happy. We are happy because we do things that we love. But how is it translating into the needs of this country? It is a conversation that is ripe. Because put your scientists on the table, put politicians on the table, put your religious people on the table, and all these other, lock them in Safari Park, give them a week, feed them, and tell them you get out of that hall with a solution for this country. And for a moment, we stop this politics and just say we want to feed people. Because it's getting out of hand, and we are still politicking, and sometimes it's, you know, politicians know how to take advantage of it. Others would say, you know, it is favoring me. The prices are high, so you bash the government. The government is also blaming our... So all these things are happening, but if I was to be advised, or to advise the government, I'll say, please, all these people who claim that they have solutions, pick them. They are Kenyans like them. Lock them into a room somewhere in Ole Sereni. Give them a week, 2, or even a month. Feed them. Tell them all those brains and the knowledge that you have. We need solution here.
And they come. It is possible.
It is possible to sort out the problems.
No one is sleeping hungry simply because.
It is possible.
And looking at the situation, you know, the population is growing. There's no point we'll say that you know, it's not growing. The population keeps growing after every census. So we really need to look at what these people will feed on, you know. So I really tend to agree with you on that. And you've spoken about science. You scientists, you feel like as scientists, you're not being given enough time. You're not being given enough, you know, of an ear. You know, people are not really listening to you and giving you the opportunity to find solutions. So maybe if you can just tell us what are some of the technological things that you have adopted, or when it comes to science, what are some of the new sciences, if I may put it that way, that are here that can help us get to a place where we are food secure as a nation?
As a country, even before we get to technologies, we need to deal with ourselves, particularly on the cultures and the beliefs that we have. And we need to know why we eat food. We don't eat ugali because it is white or it is brown or whatever. We eat them because we are looking for nutrients that are in there. And we need to be taught that way so that we change this imagination. When you are eating ugali and somebody else is eating chips, you both, or waru, you are both eating the same carbohydrates. And therefore, glucose from maize and glucose from waru and glucose from cassava is the same. The structure is the same, and that's what the cell requires. But the way we have been socialized, even in food, there are certain foods that are known, these are for this community, this is for the other one, and they are for this country. Do you know, Vivian, if there is no maize in the country, we declare this country that we don't have food. And that's wrong. Because maize is just a source of carbohydrates. Those glucose, we know them.
It is our staple.
You know, it is our staple. But there is cassava. And there is sorghum, there is millet, and they provide the same thing. How have we been socialized? And let me tell you, when I was growing up, we were, during famine, during hunger, is when we were being fed on sorghum. And therefore, we stigmatized it. Why? Because it was just coming during hunger situations, and therefore, even at this age, is when you're realizing that brown, when you go to these eating places in this country, like Koseres or whatever, you'll find that the brown ugali, all of a sudden, has become very expensive, more than the white one. And there are explanations, this one has roughage, this one whatever, all the, you know, more nutritional, and all, you know, all that discussion. It's right because others have more, you know, have more roughages, which is good for your digestion. But when you look at sorghum, it is carbohydrate, and it is the same thing. So others, it's processed, so you have reduced a bit of nutrition, or probably you've picked away a bit of vitamins and all that discussion in nutritional discussion, and it is okay to have that discussion. So we need, first of all, to figure out how do we deal, one, with wastage, and there's a lot of it. And how do we deal with wastage? For instance, if we go to a restaurant right now, a fine dining, and we take dinner, at the end of it all, there is this culture that you shouldn't, first of all, finish your food on the plate. Because when you do that, when you are hosting me as a guest, do you know if culturally I shouldn't finish all the food on the table because I will be seen, I'm gluttonous, and if I also finish, you are also not a good host because you didn't cook enough. So both of us are struggling with a culture. So I'm leaving food, And therefore, and you will must cook more than enough. So what have we done at that particular point? We have wasted that. And again, there is even stigmatization of leftovers. Look at the way we call them. That's leftover. And actually, you are eating leftover. It becomes stereotypes. Now, and yet the glucose is still the same. The nutrients, it's still the same. It didn't change because it's left and over. Now, after that, the next thing is we go to restaurants, we leave food on the table. And even if you, how do we get to a point that we need to even take the president to one of these very nice hotels? He eats, and after eating, and there's something left, he asks for a doggy bag. Pack it for me so that I take it home. It can be used the following day. That statement alone will change a lot of even the perception of that. But you know, we are even shy to carry that thing, and even the name we have given it's called doggy bag. So look at the way you can't even want to prepare it for the next day. Statistically, a third of the food that is produced globally goes to waste. It's something we call food loss and food. A third.
That's a lot.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
And it is because of the culture. So that is another discussion. But once we are done with that, how do we treat the food that we already have? How do we store it? You know, there's one thing to get your maize to harvesting stage. After harvesting it, what do you do with it? How do you store it? Because you will lose all that through aflatoxin if you don't store it very well. So you have struggled with it, it has actually gone through the agronomic things, and it's now on their store. Then you will lose it, and you can't eat it because it has higher levels of aflatoxin. So how have we dealt with that? Then once you're done with that, technologies. One, the best technology that was actually...
I'll ask you to hold that thought. We take a break and then we come back with the technologies. Let's take a break. Welcome back, and we continue with the conversation that is on food security as a country. Are we able to get to a point where we will say confidently that Kenya is food secure? And Prof is here to just help us dig into this, and he was actually just getting into the technologies that we should adopt, or that we are already adopting, to ensure that we get to that state where we are food secure as a nation. You were starting on technology number one before we went for the break.
Thank you, Vivian. And you know, there is a reason why we have to adopt technology. We must adopt technology because, one, on the 15th of November last year, the world population hit 8 billion.
Yes.
We never actually made noise about it, but it was a big thing. Then if you couple that with the fact that the climate is changing, this El Nino discussion and that drought and those drought episodes and the crazy diseases outbreak is climate change. It's happening. And now if you must be secure in terms of food, then who is farming for us? If you look at the, the statistics, you will realize that farmers are old. They are older and they are aging and they are facing off shortly. How do we get the youth to run away from it? Because the youth are into these white-collar jobs, and they are right now into content development, and they are into YouTube, TikTok, and all this. And there is no way you can weed through TikTok. You must take a hoe and actually weed and get the weed out. So that means we must figure out how do we interest the youth, because they are the bigger majority. I serve as a board member of Kenya National Bureau of Statistics, and I can tell you I have those statistics here. The number of youth and how we can project them to becoming, even in the future, we still will have this number of youth actually growing. And while it sometimes looks as if it is a bad thing that we have more youth and they're problematic, it is not. There are countries world over right now, look, Canada and all these developed countries, they are really looking for the youth because their population is actually older and facing off. So having a high number of youth is not a bad thing. It's advantageous because these are energetic, it's a source of labor, they are still very versatile, they can lose many things because they can try a lot of things. When you get to fourth floor like some of us, you now become very cautious, even the risks you can make. The youth have time, they have the ability to even try new things, fail, and they can recover. Now we need to interest them in agriculture. We need to make agriculture become trendy and swaggy. They need to come and say, and me, I'm a farmer, and they feel good about it, just like they say I'm a doctor or whatever. We need, because there is money, and the richest people actually also in the world are farmers. the real large-scale farmers, because people must eat every single time. So the market is already there for farmers. So how do we train our youth? That is how technology comes in. Where are the areas for the technology? Technologies would be in terms of the farm input, in terms of mechanization. We don't need to use those cows and whatever. We have tractors now that can do plowing very quickly. Then we need technologies that speak to the seeds, because it doesn't matter whether you've used the tractor or not. Once you have plowed and planted the seed, if the insects comes, it will eat the seed regardless of what machine you used, how modern it is, and even how irrigation happening. So we need to look at the seed. We need to look at the farm input during the time of the agronomic traits, the weeding. How are we using technology in that? How are we using technology in terms of harvesting? How are we using technology in terms of storage? And then how do we add value on the foods that we have stocked? And there are a number of them. One, there is, right now everybody is talking about AI. And the AI, artificial intelligence, is a very ripe area for this to happen. For instance, do you know when you are doing irrigation, what we are calling precision agriculture from where we sit? Right now, the easiest way is you go to where water is, and then you allow it to flood your area, and then you probably time it for 30 minutes, 1 hour, and then you stop. That means you have actually flooded your farm without even getting to know what was the differential sections of the soil. Soil in a 10-acre land is not drying at the same time. There are other areas that still have sufficient moisture, others have dried. Why can't you figure out what area requires, so that you save this water that is a limited resource? That is when the remote sensing and precision agriculture comes in. It's the automation. Now, when it comes to harvesting, we have the machines that can do the harvesting. When it comes to weeding, the technology that is right now available is what we are calling Roundup. Most people, when they hear Roundup, they think GMO. And they don't understand what is the technology of Roundup and how was it invented. For instance, if you have 1 million acre of maize farm for 1 million, it means we will be moving from here to Naivasha, for instance. And if you want people to weed manually, because weeding means you leave maize and you cut grass, so it is selective. How do you weed from here? How many people will you parade here from here to weed for you up to Naivasha? It won't happen. It is wasted by the time, but because they can do it after 1 year, the lifespan of even maize is not 1 year, it's 3 months. So by the time they get there, it will already be drying. So how do you come up with a technology that will help you with the weeding? So what has that happened? Now there's a technology of Roundup. What do? You put the glyphosate. So your maize, you put a gene in it that will make it survive herbicide, which is the biolophos or the Roundup. So what is done? Your maize, you put in the genome that herbicide tolerant. So when you plant your maize, all of this your 1 million acre, you don't need to weed. What you do, you just pump, you take the herbicide, you put it on a plane, you just fly it to Naivasha, back. As it's flying, it's spreading the herbicide in all your maize together with the weeds. So the weeds will dry off because they didn't have the gene that makes them tolerant to the herbicide, and your maize stays. That is
that maize is called GMO.
That maize is called GMO, and now it is bad. It causes cancer. Yet it has helped you, to deal with the problem of weeding. Then there is another one that I do, which is drought tolerance. And because at Kenyatta, sometimes when people hear GMO, they think it is coming from the US, they are coming to bring food into this country, and it's bad food, it will cause cancer. It is wrong to believe that way. Because this country, since 2005 up to now, mathematics will reveal to you that is around 19 years. 2005, and 5 to now, around 18 or so years. 18 years at Kenyatta University, and that is the lab that I did my master's in. At Kenyatta University. It was commissioned by the late Professor George Saitoti in 2005. So for 18 years in this country, we have been making GMOs here at Kenyatta University. Then, in this country, you have 3 other labs. Another one is at Calro. There's another lab in Il Rebecca. There's another one in Isipe. Those labs are enough and are available. There are enough people who do good research. Then somebody will say, who is protecting us? Who is whatever? There is National Biosafety Authority. It was established through the Biosafety Act 2009 and was established in 2010. For the last 13 years, they are here along Roresho side. Their work is nothing else apart from controlling the work that is done in the lab, the work that is done in the field, and the work that is done for labeling and importation. It's already existing. So when somebody says, says legislation, and it was done by the government.
Yeah.
So when a government allows such a thing to happen, it means the technology has been accepted, only regulate it. Do you know, Vivian, and let's be fair to ourselves, from 1994 to now, those are 30 years.
Yeah,
the first GMO was commercialized in 1994, 30 years ago. And right now in Kenya, we are still discussing a technology which is 30 years ago, which is 30 years old. And it is so bad. We should be having all the Americans, the South Africans, the Chinese, and all who are eating GMO to have all the cancers. The thing is, and let me break the GMO so that people understand where do we come from. For instance, when you are eating your githeri, you are mixing the beans and maize in your mouth.
Yes.
You are not going in there to remove the DNA. So you are eating actually the maize with the DNA, and you are eating beans with the DNA, which you naturally eat.
Yes.
And it is not toxic. DNA cannot be toxic. So when do we come in? And why are we taking beans, by the way? It's because beans are classically known to be having proteins. And maize, we are getting carbohydrates.
Yeah.
That is what the body wants.
Yeah.
That is why sometimes if bean is not there, we go for beef, because we are still picking carbohydrate, proteins.
Protein.
And remember, proteins are made up of amino acids, and there are only 20. So amino acids, whether it's coming from, from a goat or coming from fish and whatever, that's why we only call them proteins, because the constituents are the same. Now, when there is a climate change like now, there is flooding, and now beans, for instance, cannot grow. But we still want the proteins, because we have not stopped eating them. How do I help? The best way should have been take maize and beans and cross them, so you get binomaize, something like that. That can't happen naturally right now. That is when we come in as molecular biologists. What do? We go into the genome of beans through sequencing, and those tools are available and are the cheapest. You sequence all of it and realize through the sequencing we are able to get to know that this level, this section is responsible for proteins alone. Because the letters that form the DNA, by the way, for our viewers, are only 4. They are just A, T, G, and C. Anything that is alive that you see, be it a plant, a mosquito, whatever, in the genome, in the DNA, they're only having those 4 letters. So the difference between you and a mosquito, if it is the same, and we are not looking the same, is because those A, T, G, C, how they follow each other, that's what we are calling sequence, and what number. So if you only have a set of 20, that is a mosquito, and I'm using this just as an example. And for the human being, you will have those letters 3.2 billion. They have been counted. We have sequenced. We know which section is responsible for your skin color, which one is responsible for your hair. It is known because human genome has been sequenced. This is data that is available. So a molecular biologist, when I come in to sort your problem of proteins, what do? I go to the genome of beans. I pick the section that is the letters that are the same like the ones that are in maize. Then I move that section alone. That is what I insert in the genome of maize. Do you know at that particular point, because naturally you can't cross maize and beans, I have created maize that has got the DNA from the beans. That maize right now is called GMO. And it is very bad. Apparently it causes cancer. Yet naturally you have been eating this DNA naturally with the beans. Do you get where that thing is? And when you break it down to that level, you are eating beans, beef, and all these things. You are eating them, all of them, with the DNA. So what we are only doing, we don't want the shortness of the bean to go to maize. So leave the roots of beans alone, because there is a section that deals with that. That is why we call it precision agriculture, because now we are picking what we need, move it into the maize, then we target it into the kernels, because we don't want the proteins from beans to be on the leaves, because we are not eating the leaves. And we don't want it to hide on the roots, because we are not eating the roots. So that thing is now GMO, and it is bad. Let me tell you, my own conviction is that as Africans, we need to start thinking seriously about technologies, and we must learn from the past. For instance, and I want to tell you this, and let it be in the air, when the rest of the world was using coal, C-O-A-L, to industrialize themselves, to generate electricity, we were still here. But we were still wondering, how is this thing creating light? These guys are competing with the star. And there must have been a very serious discussion around that. But 30 years, 40 years, 50 years later, there is a caveat.
Yeah.
Right now, coal is dictated, is caveated as dirty energy. Then now we can't use, we have a lot of coal here in this country in Kitui, but we can't use. So who is compensating this country for the coal that is sitting here in Kitui that was never used, but the rest of the world used it to confuse the environment, and now we are suffering because of that. So we over-debated, we never benefited, that technology passed us. Thereafter, there's one called the Green Revolution that started by some gentleman called Norman Borlaug. It again started 1940s to 1960s, 65. It helped Asia, it helped India, it helped Mexico and the rest of the world. It was about mechanization, fertilization and all this irrigation thing. And tractors and all that. That time we were still debating. Now is when we have tractors in our villages, now working. But do you know, again, there's now another caveat. It's called carbon credit. It is now existing. Right now, when you want to sell your produce to the EU, you will quantify that how much of carbon credit has this actually produced before. That's again locked. GMO started in 1994, 30 years ago. And because I do molecular biology, we right now have a newer technology we are calling genome editing. So I can tell you in another 5 to 10 years, and we will be here, and please call me back. I will come and we will tell you that the current GMOs are not good for the environment. We will say it is not biodiversity. We need genome editing. And what the genome editing does, because we're already doing it here in Kenyatta University, we are not now picking DNA from other sources. Now we are picking DNA from the same, if it is maize, we are just editing the maize itself. So soon, that is the next technology. We will have again lost the GMO series. That is how we are dealing with the technology. So what is my advice? Anytime there is a new technology, please let's coalesce around it and get to know quickly how do we benefit on time. And my last submission on this one, Vivian, is that, yes, we wind up. Look at, at mobile phones when they first came. And I suspect you are a little available in this country. Do you know there was a narrative that these things cause cancer, we were buying anti-radiation something, we were buying whatever. Had it not been for Safaricom that was already here, I can tell you we wouldn't have picked the mobile telephony the way we did. Because at least Safaricom was here. No, you guys, you can't say it's causing. Why is it not causing the other side? This is our business. We must make sure. And it was done. Safaricom did it so well that even right now you will find me with Safaricom and Airtel, but even if the prices are still not even the same, even Airtel is cheaper, you will still see me stuck with Safaricom, yet it is probably more expensive than the other one. And that I'm saying on a light note, I'm not paid by Safaricom or Airtel
Please,
to talk about them.
Not paid for marketing.
It is not for us. But I'm just saying, I'm giving an example of how good marketing and taking advantage of a technology at the right time is very, very good. So let's deal with, we are cautious as human beings, but let's manage our caution.
How do we manage these concerns as we finish? How do we manage the concerns that we still have of GMOs, that we are failing to adopt it with with open hands? Very quickly as we finish.
We need first of all as scientists to get out of the labs and start breaking it the way we are doing it now, and many more of us to do that. So that is why I chair the Kenya University Biotechnology Consortium. It is a consortium that brings together scientists who are deep in biotechnology to talk about how do we use this technology safely. There are other organizations, we have ISA, we have other organizations that are also very deep in communication, and they are doing a good job as well. So we need more of sensitization. We need to talk to the farmers, because if you can bring a very good technology and if the farmers have not bought it, it's again going nowhere. And number 3, we need our politicians to stick to politics and leave matters science alone. Let them make the stringent laws that govern scientists, and we will be willing to abide by them. But if we use those laws that they have created to manage us and give them a product, let them consult scientists and say, I would have expected politicians that time, when this discussion around GMO came, politicians actually say, I want top scientists in this country who are doing genetic engineering, summon us to parliament, let's sit and let them interrogate one piece after another. What do you know about this? What is the advantage here? We are taking you responsible, and be allowed to sign something, and I will stick my neck and say, I am signing against the science I believe in. At the moment, we are not doing that. We are allowing all the people. Imagine up to the point where we are told that you eat GMO, you get boobs, you get breasts. Surely, if it is true GMO does that, Vivian, I can bet you cannot afford it. It will not even be available on the food shelves. We will sell it as a drug in pharmacy. And it will be so, we won't actually take it to a drug that can actually make those the kind of investment that the medical field is dealing with to make sure that we are looking good as people. We cannot just trivialize that, and that is very unfortunate. So let politicians allow the scientists to guide on newer technologies. That's not their area. Just the very way we will not go to talk about politics. We have no clue what they do. But as a country, we need to figure out how do we bring those two facets together and allow us to adopt new technologies.
All right. Thank you so much, Prof, for joining us. And thank you for always being ready to shed light on this particular matter that is GMO. I hope we can get more time maybe later on to get into the new one that you've just mentioned. Yes. And we'll find time to get into that. Now, this is where we call it a wrap right here on Good Morning Kenya. I have been your host, Vivian Ndegwa, and on behalf of the entire team from Victor Olo, Mike Megwe, Regina Manyara, and the entire crew, we want to wish you a lovely day. Do enjoy the rest of your viewing.